Good morning. Today I would like us to focus on the feasts as they were recorded in Leviticus chapter 23. You know, certain questions are asked of me on a regular basis. Really, what can I expect to happen now just before Jesus comes? And who will be able to stand in that time period? And I want you to notice, in order for us to see what is going on and how we can be prepared for that time period, I would like us to look at the feasts that God instructed the Jewish nation to keep. Now, there are three main feasts recorded in Leviticus 23. And the first one was the Feast of Passover, which was commemorated on the 14th day of the first month of the Jewish calendar. So right in the beginning of their thinking, their attention was drawn to something that God had done for them in their experience with God. And it was actually when God delivered the Jewish people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And on the very last evening of their dwelling in Egypt, God had instructed them to place blood on the doorposts of their homes. And the blood symbolized the works of Christ, the covering of Christ, His protection. And the homes where the blood was found on the doorposts were passed over by the avenging angel. So when the avenging angel went throughout the land of Egypt, in every home where there was blood on the doorpost, they would be secured. And it's interesting, dear friends, that actually answers the question here about who will be able to stand. It'll be those homes where the blood of Christ is covering it. Then I want you to notice that the second feast that was very important was the Feast of Harvest, or also known as the Feast of Weeks. And it was a time period in which they celebrated the way in which God looked after them. Now, this wasn't bound to a particular day of the month, but occurred when they started to harvest the first of their crops. So the first fruits of the crops were brought to God, and that was the starting point of the weeks of harvest. In actual fact, God said that they must set aside 50 days in which they celebrated the fact that God looked after them and that He cared for them. So this was a very important event, and it took place during the time of harvest. Now, between the second feast and the third feast, which I'm going to come to, we have two other feasts recorded. We have what we call the Feast of Trumpets. Now, the Feast of Trumpets took place on the first day of the 7th month, and actually ran for 9 days. And we're going to talk about that. And you'll notice that I've actually highlighted it in red. Because in order for us to understand what is going on and what we need to hear what these trumpets are saying is happening over here. And so I'm going to be drawing your attention to this. Then we have, on the 10th day of the 7th month, we have one of the main and most important events in the Jewish calendar, and that was the Day of Atonement, or the Day of Yom Kippur, which means it was the final day. It was the day in which the destinies of mankind was decided. And you'll notice that the Feast of Trumpets were blowing in order to warn the people that this day is coming. And then right after this Day of Atonement, we have on the 15th day of the 7th month, the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles commemorated two things, reminded the Jewish nation of two things. It reminded them of the journey that they spent in the wilderness of the Egyptians, where for 40 years they lived in temporary dwelling places. It was a reminder to them that they weren't to become rooted or grounded in the world, but that this world was not our home. Our home was to be in the future. We are not of this world, as Jesus said. We belong to Him, And He's coming back to fetch us, to be with Him where He is. And so this was a constant reminder that we are not permanent dwellers of planet Earth, but that we are pilgrims here, and that we are looking forward to when Jesus would come to fetch us to be with Him forever. So we see here that we have feasts that are very important, and I haven't gone into the detail of each one, but in the future, in next year, I am going to start our year off by looking at the Feast of Trumpets. Now, over the next few videos, I'm actually going to be breaking away from our study of the timeline. And I'm going to be introducing a few subjects that I think you will enjoy to help us to celebrate the incredible event that took place on planet Earth so many years ago here in Bethlehem. And that was the birth of Jesus Christ, our Savior. I hope that you will have a wonderful festive time, and that you will use this time as you break away from work to think about Christ, to rededicate yourself to Him. And as you enjoy the next few videos, I hope that they will help you to start off your new year by a new and lively and powerful experience with Jesus Christ. May God bless you in this time.